reverse the edges of the filter, and I'm going to drop it down into our brewing chamber.
We don't mind a few grounds. We're used to campfire coffee.
It's got this little spring and this little clip that goes in this hollow tube. I put a boiling chamber here.
To keep it down, that's cool.
And while the water's starting to heat up, I get to give you some instant steam facts on the site.
Cool.
This is a vacuum pot brewer. The original patent on this device was filed in Berlin, Germany in 1830 by an inventor named Leo. Except Herr Leo didn't do anything with his invention. We don't know why, but he never put it into commercial production. So there it sat for 8 years. Then a French woman came along, her name was Marie Massot, and she filed actually a modification of his patent for 2 hand-blown glass globes that sat on top of each other, connected with a glass stem. She was also known as Mimi Massot. She was a very elite and high-priced French courtesan. She had a lot of big money clientele. And her device was just intended to ooh all her clientele. Well, it worked, because the clientele was so glad with it that they wanted one for their own homes. So, no time at all, she gets a stack of orders and goes, I should put this into commercial production, which she does 2 years later in 1840. So it's actually one of our older styles of brewing coffee. But the only problem with those hand-blown glass globes sitting right on top of an open flame is if you're not real careful in the brewing process, that glass will tend to shatter and break on you. Okay? Sometimes, no matter how careful you were, it shatter and break on you anyway. It's just the fragile nature of hand-blown glass. But despite that drama, it became the rage all over France and then all over Europe. In fact, back in the 1840s, if you didn't have a siphon, you were not one of the cool kids. Right? But if you jump up to the year 1910, 2 American sisters up in Massachusetts, they filed a patent for it became known as the Silex coffee brewer. I grew up with a manufacturer of coffee makers, Proctor Silex.
Proctor Silex, yeah.
And I always thought that was 2 families, right? Proctors and Silexes, Proctors and Gambles.
Yeah.
But the Sutton sisters came up with the Silex as an anagram, right? And the anagram stands for a sanitary, interesting way to brew luscious coffee that was easy to make and X-ray clear. Who knew?
I didn't know that.
Sanitary, interesting, luscious, easy to make X-ray clear, Silex. That was the anagram for the coffee maker. Kind of a first cousin of this model here in form and function. But the really cool thing about it was the S, because it stood for the revolutionary new glass that they used. See, Owen Corning had just introduced Corningware. So you had one of the very first commercial applications of Pyrex glass. So you didn't have all that shattering and breaking into the heat anymore. So Pyrex glass it was, Pyrex glass it still is. This is sitting over a halogen heat lamp instead of an open flame, obviously. But this is where really good hard science and luscious brewing coffee get together. Because you can already see right here where that chain is laying next to closest to the heat source, you already see these micro bubbles come up. You're starting to see steam come out of the neck, right? Well, as this gets closer to a full boil, which is going to be 212 degrees Fahrenheit, and once those bubbles start to get kind of really big, I'm going to get this top chamber and I'm going to seat it down into it. And when I do that, that rubber gasket is going to seal that neck in. And when I seal that neck in, I'm going to trap all that vapor pressure that's coming out right now of steam. And when I do that, you're going to see an instant and vigorous change to the water. This is the part where I really can't walk away from when somebody asks me a question, because if you do, it'll start dying. So with that metal superheating the water, you've got thermodynamics involved, right? The metal heating up faster than the water is actually focused in the boiler point. So I'm going to see the big bubbles start to come up. I'm going to go ahead and seal that in. Now that vapor pressure is trapped. So now natural physics is instantly taking over, and that vapor pressure now is expanding. And because if this tube was solid glass, this thing would have already knocked off like a champagne cork. But because the tube's hollow, with that vapor pressure expanding, it's pressing down on the water, and the water's following the only escape route it has, which is to follow that hollow tube up to the top. If you're a fan of physics like we all are, that's the actual hydrostatic water pressures and what's going on inside here right now.
I remember that from high school.
Yeah, right?
So that's actually what's actually going on inside. That's why physics teachers love this demonstration. They're like, see, math really does work. So this tube is obviously not long enough to touch the bottom because I need that room to have the water to come up. So this is where I drop the heat down to 2 minutes. And I first up the mat is this watermark. Beautiful. And like a French press, it's a full immersion process. So we fold the grounds into the water. A quick little series of curves, just enough to get a little vortex going in there. Start from scratch. But this is where people say, well, Michael, how does this change the flavor of the coffee? Well, different brewing methods won't change the basic flavor of the coffee. What they do is they bring out different characteristics. So like a real normal French press, there's no filtration at all, so you're getting everything the bean has to offer. This has a very slight filtration, so this will probably be the smoothest cup of coffee you ever had. That's the real draw about that. I know that you got cream and sugar coming, and but take the first sip of it, because I've lost track of the number of people who say, oh wow, who knew? I can taste the coffee and
Yeah, I want to taste it.
And since these are small, single origin coffees, they really have very unique flavors to each one of them. This 21 is what we use for our espresso over here. It's one of only 2 blends that we have on the reserve side. This is a mix of Kenyan and Guatemalan coffees, and so you really don't like it. So when I started the process, I had the greater pressure in the bottom chamber than the top. Now when you take this off of the heat, the atmospheric pressure points flip. And so you got the greater pressure in the top chamber. You've actually got a negative pressure in the bottom chamber. The negative pressure sets a vacuum in the tube. Once you got the vacuum set in the tube, and that's now vacuuming the coffee through the filter that we put in there to start with. So hence the French term for a vacuum is siphon. If you've ever had, like me, the misfortune back in the old days of having to siphon gas out with a tube out of a tank, okay, this is the exact same principle, but this tastes a whole lot better. So you're going to see here a couple of things as the last of the coffee comes down. About right there. You see that little bubble and gurgle that just happened? That's the atmospheric pressures in both chambers. They're equaled out now. And now you can break the vacuum in the tube and serve the coffee. But you got to have a dome when you're done. Because if you don't have a dome, then the stir's going to done correct. And it's the shape of the dome that's actually critical. Because you can buy one of these at home, with your gas or electric. The gas one's a whole lot cheaper because it's kind of like one of those little camp stove setups, with a little burner. And so you can get one of these, but if you get that coffee and you stir it, like you're scrambling eggs or, whipping butter or something like that, what you're going to do is you're going to over-stir the coffee. And you'll know you over-stirred the coffee because you see how nice and rounded that is? It'll be like a pinched caramel. And that means you stirred it too much. And what that does is force the extraction. Instead of letting it happen naturally, it forces the extraction, and the coffee can come out a little bit bitter. But if it's nice and rounded like that, we're all good.